I inherited my aunt's spaceship, and honestly, no one wanted it. Rusty hull, outdated systems, and the smell of old star maps. What could go wrong? Then they opened the cargo bay, expecting dust and junk. And instead, a tiny alien kitten peeked out, glowing eyes and all. One look at the adorable little predator, and the entire crew went from ignoring the ship to scrambling for a seat. That's when I realized, in a galaxy full of deadly species, humans and apparently alien kittens always find a way to turn the impossible into ours. The inheritance nobody wanted, Marcus. Chun stared at the holographic display floating above his wrist communicator and tried to calculate how many meals he could afford this week. The number came back at 9, maybe 10 if he skipped breakfast. His 3 jobs on Orion Station barely covered rent in the cramped quarters he shared with 2 other workers. Sleep was a luxury he couldn't afford. Food was fuel. And dreams were something people with money got to have. The message notification blinked insistently in the corner of his vision. Marcus almost dismissed it, assuming it was another late payment warning, but the sender ID made him pause. Kelton and Associates Legal Services. His stomach dropped. Legal messages meant trouble, and trouble meant expenses he definitely couldn't handle. He opened it anyway because ignoring problems never made them disappear. Mr. Chun, we regret to inform you of the passing of Elena Cheen, registered as your paternal aunt. As per her final wishes, you have been designated as a potential heir to her remaining assets. Please respond within 72 hours to accept or decline this inheritance. Marcus read it 3 times. Aunt Elena was dead. He hadn't seen her in 15 years, not since he was 12 years old. She had visited once, bringing stories of distant worlds and strange cargo routes that made his parents uncomfortable. His father called her reckless. His mother said she wasted her life chasing fantasies instead of building something stable. After that visit, Elena never came back. Marcus remembered her differently. She had kind eyes and calloused hands, and she listened when he talked about wanting to see the stars. She told him that space wasn't romantic. It was hard and lonely and dangerous, but it was also beautiful in ways that made all the difficulty worthwhile. Then she gave him a small crystal that glowed faintly in the dark and told him to keep dreaming. His parents threw the crystal away the day after she left. Now she was gone. And apparently she remembered him. Marcus opened the attached inventory file and felt his hope deflate immediately. 1 cargo vessel, designation Dawnbreaker, currently impounded at Station 12. Estimated value after fees and back taxes, minimal. No liquid assets, no property, no savings accounts. Just an old ship nobody wanted. The lawyer's follow-up message arrived an hour later. Mr. Chen, you should know that 6 other family members were contacted before you. All declined the inheritance. The ship has significant outstanding docking fees and requires extensive repairs. If you decline, the vessel will be auctioned by the station authority to cover debts. You have 60 hours remaining to decide. Marcus sat on his bunk in the tiny quarters and did the math again. A cargo ship, even an old one, had to be worth something. Parts alone could fetch decent money. If he could get it operational, maybe he could hire it out for basic freight runs. It wasn't much, but it was more than he had now. He thought about Aunt Elena, alone on some distant station when her heart finally gave out. Nobody claimed her body. Nobody attended whatever service they held. She died the way she lived, separate from a family that never understood her. Marcus made his decision. He sent the acceptance form before he could change his mind. Station 12 sat on the edge of civilized space, a rusting collection of docking bays and storage facilities that serviced independent haulers and small operations. Marcus used most of his savings to book passage on a supply transport, arriving 3 days later with nothing but a duffel bag and growing anxiety about whether he'd made a terrible mistake. The impound supervisor was a tired-looking woman named Garcia who barely glanced at his identification before pulling up the records. Dawnbreaker, Bay 47 Delta. She's been sitting there for 8 months. You planning to fly her out or scrap her? Haven't decided yet, Marcus admitted. Garcia studied him for a moment, then sighed. Look, kid, I'm going to be straight with you. That ship has been flagged by 3 different agencies. Nothing illegal, just inquiries. People have been asking about it, wanting to know when it gets released. I don't know what your aunt was hauling, but somebody out there is very interested in that vessel. What kind of people? The kind with expensive ships and credentials that make station security nervous. My advice? Take a quick look, decide if it's worth the headache, and make your choice fast. The longer you wait, the more complicated this gets. Marcus followed Garcia through the maze of docking bays until they reached the older section where forgotten ships went to gather dust. Bay 47 Delta held the Dawnbreaker, and Marcus felt his heart sink at the sight of her. She was smaller than he expected, maybe 60 meters long, with a hull that showed decades of use. Scratches, dents, and discolored patches where emergency repairs had been made covered every surface. One of the landing struts had been replaced with a slightly different model that didn't quite match. The cargo bay door hung slightly crooked, but she was his. For better or worse, she was his. Garcia handed him the access codes and left him alone with his inheritance. Marcus approached the airlock, pressed his palm against the scanner, and heard the ancient mechanisms grind to life. The door opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure, and stale air washed over him. The interior was dark except for emergency lighting that cast everything in dim red. Marcus stepped inside, letting his eyes adjust, and immediately noticed something wrong. The air wasn't just stale, it was warm. Warmer than it should be in a ship that had been powered down for months. Something was running. Something was alive. Marcus moved through the narrow corridors, following the warmth toward the cargo hold. His hand found a wall-mounted flashlight, and he clicked it on. Sweeping the beam across the cramped galley, the tiny personal quarters, the engineering section with its maze of exposed pipes and conduits, the cargo hold door was sealed but not locked. Marcus pressed the release, and it slid open with a soft hiss. The hold was mostly empty except for a few secured containers, and what looked like a small environmental pod in the center. It glowed softly, pulsing with bioluminescent light that shifted through colors Marcus didn't have names for. The warmth was coming from there, along with a faint humming that he felt in his chest more than heard. Marcus approached slowly, his flashlight beam dancing across the pod's transparent surface. Inside, curled in what looked like comfortable sleep, was a creature unlike anything he had ever seen. It was small, perhaps the size of a house cat, with a body covered in translucent fur that caught and reflected light like fiber optics. The creature had 6 legs tucked beneath itself, and its head was crowned with delicate tendrils that moved slowly even in sleep, trailing luminous patterns in the air. Wings, gossamer thin and folded against its back, sparkled with points of light that resembled stars. It was the most beautiful thing Marcus had ever seen. As if sensing his presence. The creature stirred. Its eyes opened slowly, revealing pupils that held entire galaxies, swirling with light and color and depth that made Marcus dizzy. The creature looked at him, tilted its head, and made a sound like wind chimes singing in harmony with distant thunder. Then every alarm in the ship activated at once. Marcus stumbled backward as his communicator exploded with notifications. Emergency alerts, security warnings, and automated messages flooded his display faster than he could read them. The station's proximity sensors were screaming. 3 ships had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system, all of them changing course directly toward Station 12, toward him, toward the creature in the cargo hold. The creature stood up in its pod, pressing small paws against the transparent barrier. Its eyes met Marcus's, and he felt something impossible. Not words exactly, but meaning flowing directly into his mind. Scared, alone, waiting, hope. Marcus's communicator chimed with an incoming. Transmission marked urgent priority. Then another. Then a third. All demanding immediate access to his ship. All claiming authority. All converging on his position with intentions he couldn't begin to guess. He looked at the glowing creature watching him with those infinite eyes and realized that Aunt Elena hadn't left him a ship. She had left him a responsibility, a mystery, and possibly a war. The question was whether he was brave enough or foolish enough to figure out which got secrets of the vanished. The first person through the airlock was a woman who moved with the efficient grace of someone who spent more time in zero gravity than on solid ground. She wore a gray environmental suit marked with the insignia of the Xenobiological Research Institute, and her eyes went immediately to the glowing pod in the cargo hold. Dr. Kira. Voss didn't bother with introductions or pleasantries. She simply stared at the creature inside the pod with an expression that mixed wonder and something close to fear. Do you have any idea what you have here? Her voice was quiet, almost reverent. Marcus positioned himself between her and the pod instinctively. I know it belonged to my aunt. That makes it mine now. That creature doesn't belong to anyone. A second figure pushed through the airlock, this one wearing military combat armor with captain's stripes. Captain Thane was broad-shouldered and carried himself with the rigid posture of career military. His hand rested on the plasma pistol at his hip, not threatening, but certainly visible. It's a matter of galactic security. We've been tracking rumors of its existence for 3 years. Tracking? More like hunting. The third arrival squeezed his bulk through the airlock with difficulty. Broker Zix was Gatharian. Nearly 7 feet of blue-scaled muscle wrapped in expensive clothing that couldn't quite hide the weapons underneath. His voice rumbled like stones grinding together. Let's not pretend this is about security or science. That creature is worth more than this entire station. Collectors across 5 systems would pay fortunes just to study it. Marcus felt the creature press closer to the pod's barrier behind him. That feeling of fear intensified in his mind, along with something else. Trust. The creature was trusting him to protect it. Everyone needs to calm down. Marcus raised his hands, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. I don't know what this creature is, but I'm not handing it over to anyone until I understand what's happening. My aunt left it in my care for a reason. Your aunt was Elena Chen. Dr. Voss pulled out a data tablet, her fingers moving rapidly across the display. She was a cargo hauler who disappeared from official records 12 years ago. Before that, she was Lieutenant Elena Chun, Special Operations, assigned to classified missions during the Cascade War. The Cascade War? Marcus knew that name. Everyone did. 20 years ago, a series of star systems collapsed without warning. Entire civilizations vanished overnight, pulled into dimensional rifts that appeared suddenly and consumed everything within light years. The catastrophe killed billions and destabilized an entire sector of space. The official records blamed the Celestial Weavers, an ancient species that supposedly triggered the cascade deliberately. Humanity and a dozen other species hunted the Celestial Weavers to extinction in retaliation. What does that have to do with this creature? Marcus asked, though cold certainty was already forming in his stomach. Captain Thane moved closer, his expression grim. Because that creature is a Celestial Weaver. The last one we know of? Your aunt was part of the extermination fleet, but she went rogue, disappeared with her ship and cargo. We assumed she'd been killed or captured. Apparently she was hiding this thing instead. Marcus looked at the creature in the pod. It watched the conversation with intelligent eyes, those luminous tendrils waving slowly. It didn't look like a monster capable of destroying civilizations. It looked fragile, delicate, and possibly alone. If the Celestial Weavers destroyed those systems, why would my aunt protect one? Because the official story is a lie. Dr. Voss's voice cut through the tension. She held up her tablet displaying data that Marcus couldn't fully understand. I've spent 15 years studying the Cascade event. The dimensional mathematics, the collapse patterns, the residual energy signatures. The Celestial Weavers didn't cause the cascades. They tried to stop them. Captain Thane's hand tightened on his weapon. Doctor, that's classified information. Classified lies. Dr. Voss didn't back down. The rifts were caused by our own faster-than-light technology. Every jump we make tears tiny holes in the fabric of space. Individually, they are harmless and heal naturally. But billions of ships making billions of jumps over centuries, the damage accumulated. The Celestial Weavers existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensional space simultaneously. They were the only species capable of repairing the damage we caused. Then why did the systems collapse? Marcus demanded. Because we killed too many of them too quickly. Dr. Voss's voice shook with suppressed emotion. The Celestial Weavers gathered at those doomed systems, trying to seal rifts that had grown too large. They exhausted themselves attempting to save civilizations that feared and hated them. When they failed and the cascades happened, we blamed them for the disaster instead of acknowledging our own responsibility. Then we hunted down the survivors. The cargo hold fell silent except for the soft humming from the environmental pod. Marcus felt sick. The greatest tragedy in recent galactic history, billions dead. And it was all based on fear and misunderstanding. Your aunt figured it out. Dr. Voss continued. She found proof during the war, saw what the Celestial Weavers were actually doing. She saved this young one and spent the next decade keeping it hidden and safe, moving constantly to stay ahead of people looking for it. People like me. Captain Thane's voice was heavy with something that might have been regret. My orders were to locate and secure any surviving Celestial Weavers for study. The military wanted to understand their abilities, see if we could replicate their dimensional manipulation. Your aunt always stayed one step ahead. Broker Zix laughed, a sound like breaking rocks. How noble, everyone pretending they care about truth and justice. I care about profit. That creature's biology alone is worth a fortune. Its ability to manipulate dimensions could revolutionize travel, weapons, everything. Whoever controls it controls the future. Marcus felt the creature's fear intensify. It pressed against the pod barrier, those infinite eyes fixed on him. Then something happened that changed everything. The creature began to glow brighter, and Marcus felt information flooding into his mind. Not words, but pure understanding. Images, memories, knowledge that belonged to the creature flowing directly into his consciousness. He saw the cascade, war from the Celestial Weaver perspective. Saw them desperately working to seal rifts while ships fired on them, thinking them enemies. Saw them dying by the dozens, exhausting their life force trying to save species that wanted them dead. Saw the last survivors fleeing, hunted and afraid, watching their entire civilization collapse. He saw his aunt, young and horrified, discovering the truth. Saw her make the choice to save one young Celestial Weaver, knowing it would make her a fugitive. Saw years of running, hiding, protecting this fragile creature while the galaxy celebrated the extinction of its entire species. Then he saw something else. Current dimensional scans, data the creature could sense instinctively. The rifts were still there, still growing. The Cascade War had only been the beginning. Without Celestial Weavers to repair the damage, the rifts were spreading slowly but inevitably. In another decade, maybe two, they would reach critical mass. The cascades would begin again, this time consuming not just a few systems, but potentially entire sectors of inhabited space. The creature showed him one more thing, a possibility, a bond. Celestial Weavers had once partnered with other species, sharing their abilities, working together to maintain the dimensional barriers. The young one in the pod was old enough now, mature enough to form such a bond. It needed a partner, someone willing to share its burden and its power. It was offering that partnership to Marcus. The vision ended as suddenly as it began. Marcus staggered, catching himself against the pod. The three others were staring at him with varying expressions of shock. It spoke to you. Dr. Voss breathed. That's never been documented. Celestial Weavers could communicate with their own kind, but never with other species. It didn't speak. Marcus's voice sounded strange in his own ears. It showed me everything. The truth about the war, about what's coming, about what needs to be done. Captain Thane stepped forward cautiously. What did it show you? Before Marcus could answer, every alarm in the station activated simultaneously. Emergency broadcasts flooded all channels, and through the cargo bay's small viewport, Marcus saw something that made his blood run cold. Reality was tearing. A dimensional rift had appeared less than a light year from the station, visible as a massive distortion in space that swallowed starlight and radiated waves of destructive energy. It was growing rapidly, already large enough to be seen with the naked eye. Station 12 had maybe hours before the rift reached them. The creature in the pod made a sound like crystal bells shattering. Its glow intensified, and Marcus felt its desperate urgency flowing into his mind that it could stop the rift. But not alone. It needed help. It needed a partner. It needed him. Dr. Voss was already working her tablet frantically. The rift is expanding at 0.03% per minute. At this rate, it will consume the station in 4 hours. There's no time to evacuate everyone. Captain Thane was on his communicator, barking orders to his ship. All vessels, emergency departure protocols. Civilian evacuation takes priority. There isn't time, Marcus heard himself say. Even your military ships can evacuate 20,000 people in 4 hours. Broker Zix moved toward the exit. Then I suggest we stop wasting time talking and start running, or we seal the rift. Marcus placed his hand against the pod's barrier. The creature inside pressed its small paw against the same spot from the other side. The Celestial Weaver can do it. We can do it, together. The 3 others stared at him. The bonding process is irreversible, Dr. Voss warned. It will change you fundamentally. Your biology, your consciousness, your entire existence. You won't be fully human anymore, but I'll be alive. Marcus looked at each of them in turn. We'll all be alive. Everyone on this station will be alive. Isn't that worth it? Captain Thane holstered his weapon slowly. You're asking us to trust a species we spent 20 years hunting to extinction. I'm asking you to let me fix a mistake we all made. Marcus turned back to the pod. My aunt spent 12 years protecting this creature, keeping it safe, waiting for the right moment. She chose me because she knew I had nothing to lose and everything to gain. She was right. He pressed the release on the environmental pod. The barrier dissolved in a cascade of light, and the Celestial Weaver stepped out carefully. Up close, it was even more beautiful. Its translucent fur catching and refracting light into rainbow patterns. Those delicate tendrils reached toward Marcus, glowing with soft luminescence. The creature made a sound like distant music, and Marcus felt the question in his mind one more time. Clear and certain and offering something greater than himself. Partnership. Trust. Hope. Marcus knelt down, extending his hand. Let's save the galaxy together. The Celestial Weaver placed its paw in his palm. And the universe changed forever. The bond that saved worlds, the moment the Celestial Weaver touched Marcus's hand. Reality fractured into 1,000 layers of perception. He gasped as his consciousness expanded beyond the boundaries of his physical body, stretching into dimensions he had never known existed. Normal space remained visible, but now he could see through it, behind it, into the flowing currents of dimensional energy that existed beneath everything. The universe was alive in ways he had never imagined. Energy flowed like rivers through channels invisible to normal sight. Stars weren't just burning spheres of gas, but anchors that stabilized reality itself. The fabric of space wasn't empty void, but a delicate membrane holding 2 realities apart. And that membrane was damaged everywhere he looked. Tears, rifts, holes punched through by countless ships making countless jumps over countless years. Most were small, barely noticeable, but they were spreading, connecting, growing into larger wounds that bled dimensional energy into normal space. The massive rift approaching. Station 12 blazed in his enhanced vision like a screaming mouth trying to swallow everything nearby. It pulsed with destructive force, expanding with each passing second, and Marcus could see exactly how it would consume the station. Reality would simply fold inward, collapsing into hyperspace and taking everyone with it. But he could also see how to stop it. Knowledge flowed from the Celestial Weaver into his mind, not as words or images, but as pure understanding. Techniques refined over millions of years, the delicate art of manipulating dimensional barriers, of pulling torn edges together and reinforcing weakened sections. It was like surgery performed on reality itself, requiring precision, patience, and power. Marcus felt his body changing. His skin took on a faint luminescence. His eyes shifted to see spectrums that didn't exist before. His nervous system rewired itself to process information from multiple dimensions simultaneously. It wasn't painful, but it was overwhelming. He was becoming something new, something that existed partially in both realities at once. The Celestial Weaver changed too. It grew slightly larger, its features sharpening, its consciousness expanding to embrace human concepts of language and linear time. The bond flowed both ways, each of them becoming more like the other, while remaining fundamentally themselves. When the transformation completed, Marcus stood on unsteady legs. The cargo hold looked different now, layered with dimensional energy that painted everything in colors he had no names for. He turned to the three people watching him with expressions ranging from awe to terror. How long was that? His voice sounded normal, at least to his own ears. Dr. Voss checked her tablet with shaking hands. 47 seconds. The rift will reach the station in 3 hours and 32 minutes. Marcus looked at the Celestial Weaver, who he now understood preferred to be called Loomis, a designation that translated roughly to light bearer in their species' nonverbal language. Loomis looked back at him with those galaxy-filled eyes, and Marcus felt their shared determination. We can seal it. Marcus moved toward the cargo bay door. But we need to get closer. The Dawnbreaker can handle it. Captain Thane blocked his path. Wait, even if you conceal this rift, you're asking us to trust completely unknown capabilities. We need verification, observation, scientific documentation. 20,000 people will die while you're documenting. Marcus met the captain's gaze steadily. You want verification? Watch what happens. Record everything, but don't try to stop us. The captain studied him for a long moment, then stepped aside. I'm coming with you. My ship will provide escort and sensor coverage. If this works, the galaxy needs to see it. If it doesn't work, someone needs to witness what we tried. Dr. Voss was already gathering her equipment. I'm going too. This is the most important xenobiological event in recorded history. I won't miss it. Even Broker Zix moved toward the door, though his expression was calculating rather than enthusiastic. If the creature can actually seal rifts, the economic implications are staggering. I want to observe the process firsthand. Marcus didn't have time to argue. He moved through the Dawnbreaker with new confidence, Loomis gliding beside him on silent pause. The ship's systems came to life at his touch, responding faster than they should have. Marcus realized that Loomis was helping, interfacing with the ship's computers through methods that bypassed normal controls entirely. Within minutes, the Dawnbreaker's engines roared to life. Marcus settled into the pilot's seat, his hands moving over controls that suddenly made perfect sense. Loomis jumped onto the console beside him, tendrils waving gently, and Marcus felt their minds synchronizing. They weren't separate anymore. Not truly. They were partners operating as a single unit with complementary abilities. The Dawnbreaker launched from Station 12 with Captain Thane's military cruiser following close behind. Dr. Voss had set up sensor equipment throughout the cargo hold, recording everything. Broker Zix watched through the viewport with intense focus, already calculating profit margins as they approached the rift. Marcus felt its power pressing against his expanded consciousness. It was massive, a wound in reality that stretched across thousands of kilometers. Energy bled from it in waves that distorted space and time, making navigation difficult. Normal ships would be torn apart by the gravitational shearing before they got close enough to matter, but the Dawnbreaker wasn't a normal ship anymore. Loomis extended their influence through the vessel's hull, creating a protective barrier that existed partially in dimensional space. The ship slipped through the destructive forces like a needle threading through fabric, getting closer to the rift than should have been possible. Marcus brought them to a stop at what felt like the right distance. Through the viewport, the rift dominated the sky, a swirling vortex of impossible colors and distorted geometry that hurt to look at directly. Behind them, Station 12 was a tiny point of light, fragile and temporary. How do we do this? Marcus asked Loomis, though he already knew the answer. The knowledge was there in his mind, planted by the bond. They would have to enter the rift itself. Work from inside, pulling the torn edges of reality back together, while the destructive forces tried to rip them apart. It would be dangerous, exhausting, and possibly fatal. But it was the only way. Loomis made a sound like wind chimes singing courage, and Marcus felt their shared resolve strengthen. They had chosen this. Together they would see it through. Captain Thane, fall back to a safe distance. Marcus activated the ship's communication system. If this doesn't work, you'll need to evacuate the station. Dr. Voss, I hope your sensors can handle dimensional fluctuations, because it's about to get strange. He didn't wait for responses. Marcus pushed the Dawnbreaker forward, directly toward the heart of the rift. The ship shuddered as they crossed the boundary between normal space and the chaotic region where dimensions blurred together. Alarms screamed warnings that Marcus ignored. Loomis glowed brighter, their protective field holding the ship together against forces that should have torn it into atoms inside the rift. Reality didn't follow normal rules. Marcus saw past, present, and future overlapping. The cargo hold existed in 3 places simultaneously. His hands moved through layers of probability, each gesture creating ripples that spread in directions that shouldn't exist. But Loomis knew how to navigate this chaos. Through their bond, Marcus understood the underlying structure. The rift was a tear in the membrane separating normal space from dimensional space. And around the edges of that tear, the fabric of reality was frayed and unstable. They needed to find those edges, reinforce them, and carefully pull them back together. It was like stitching a wound that fought against healing. Marcus and Loomis worked as one. He piloted the ship along the rift's perimeter, while Loomis reached out with abilities that manipulated dimensional energy directly. Marcus felt each adjustment, each careful manipulation as Loomis found the torn edges and began pulling them together. It was delicate work, requiring absolute precision. Too much force would make the tear worse. Too little would accomplish nothing. Time became meaningless inside the rift. Seconds might have been hours. Marcus's body ached from maintaining concentration, but he felt Loomis's strength flowing through their bond, supporting him, sharing the burden. They moved around the rift methodically, section by section, pulling reality back into alignment. The destructive forces fought them every step of the way. Waves of dimensional turbulence crashed against the Dawnbreaker, trying to tear the ship apart. Loomis's protective barrier held, but Marcus felt it weakening. They were burning through energy faster than they could replenish it. Loomis was exhausting themselves, just as their ancestors had done trying to seal the rifts during the Cascade War. We're not going to die here. Marcus spoke through gritted teeth, pushing the ship forward despite the shaking and alarms. Your species didn't survive extinction just to fail now. We finished this. Loomis sang something that might have been agreement or might have been determination. Their glow intensified, drawing on reserves Marcus hadn't known existed. Together, they pushed harder, working faster, racing against their own depleting strength. Finally, after what felt like eternity, they reached the final section. The rift had shrunk dramatically, reduced from thousands of kilometers to barely a few hundred meters. It still pulsed with destructive force, but it was dying, collapsing as the edges they had sealed cut off its energy source. Marcus and Loomis performed the final maneuver together. One last pull, bringing the torn edges of reality into contact, holding them steady while the dimensional membrane healed itself. The energy required was enormous, far more than either of them had left, but they weren't alone anymore. Through the viewport, Marcus saw Captain Thane's cruiser had moved closer. Its shields extended to protect the Dawnbreaker from the worst of the turbulence. Dr. Voss was broadcasting their actions on every frequency. And Marcus felt something impossible happening. People were watching. Thousands of them across the station, across nearby systems, across half the galaxy through relay networks. They were seeing a human and a celestial weaver working together, seeing the truth about the rifts, seeing what cooperation could accomplish. And somehow, that belief mattered. Marcus felt strength flowing into him that wasn't his own, wasn't Loomis's, but came from somewhere else entirely. The collective hope of thousands of watching people channeled through the bond, giving them the final push they needed. The rift sealed with a flash of light that briefly outshone nearby stars. The destructive forces collapsed inward, and the dimensional membrane knit itself back together, leaving behind only a faint scar that would heal completely given time. Marcus slumped in the pilot's seat, completely exhausted. Loomis collapsed beside him, their glow fading to barely visible. Through their bond, Marcus felt Loomis's satisfaction mixed with profound weariness. They had done it. Together, they had accomplished what should have been impossible. The communication system erupted with voices. Captain Thane reporting success to his superiors. Dr. Voss babbling about unprecedented readings and revolutionary discoveries. Broker Zix calculating profit margins with audible excitement. And beneath it all, the sound of Station 12 celebrating. 20,000 people cheering because they were still alive. Marcus managed to pilot the Dawnbreaker back to the station on the last reserves of power. When they docked, he could barely walk. Loomis had to be carried, though their tendrils still waved weakly, reassuring Marcus through their bond that they were all right. Just tired got the station's main hangar was packed with people. Workers, families, children, all wanting to see the human and celestial weaver who had saved them. The crowd parted as Marcus walked through, Loomis cradled in his arms. The fear was gone from their faces, replaced by wonder and gratitude. Captain Thane was waiting with official-looking documents already prepared. The Galactic Council has been watching. They're authorizing immediate formation of what they're calling the Guardian Program. You and Loomis would be the first, but they want to establish protocols for bonding with other species, training more teams, creating a network of rift sealers. Dr. Voss approached with barely contained enthusiasm. The xenobiological data alone will revolutionize our understanding of dimensional mechanics. But more than that, I want to help. I want to research safer FTL technology, find ways to minimize the damage we cause with every jump. If we're going to fix this properly, we need to stop making it worse. Even Broker Zix had an offer, though it came with his characteristic calculating tone. The Gatharian Trade Consortium will fund the Guardian program. Ships, equipment, supplies, whatever you need. This isn't charity, there's profit in saving the galaxy. But I suspect you don't care about my motivations as long as the support is real. Marcus looked at Loomis, and through their bond, he felt the Celestial Weaver's approval. This was what their species had always wanted. Cooperation, partnership, different species working together to maintain the delicate balance of reality itself. We'll do it. Marcus's voice was quiet but firm. But we do this right. No more hunting, no more fear, no more lies about what happened during the Cascade War. The truth gets told. The Celestial Weavers tried to save us, and we repaid them with extinction. That's the foundation we built on. Honesty about our mistakes. Captain Thane nodded slowly. Agreed. The official records will be corrected. It won't bring back the Celestial Weavers we killed, but it's a start. Over the following weeks, Marcus and Loomis became something the galaxy had never seen before. The first Guardian pair bonded across species lines, working to repair the damage that centuries of careless FTL travel had caused. They traveled from system to system, sealing rifts, teaching others what was possible, proving that cooperation could overcome fear. Dr. Voss led the research initiative that developed new FTL technology. Drives that created temporary passages rather than tearing holes. It would take decades to replace all the old drives, but progress was being made. Captain Thane headed the Guardian protection fleet, ensuring that Marcus and Loomis could work without interference. Other Guardian pairs began forming as more species volunteered for the bonding process. Each partnership unique, but all sharing the same goal. Even Broker Zix proved useful. His financial networks providing resources and funding that government bureaucracies couldn't match. He made enormous profits, certainly, but the galaxy got saved in the process. And Marcus learned to accept that motivation mattered less than results. The work was hard. Some rifts took weeks to seal. Some systems were too damaged and had to be evacuated. Marcus and Loomis pushed themselves to exhaustion repeatedly. But they kept going because the alternative was watching reality collapse. One night, Months after everything began, Marcus sat in the Dawnbreaker's cargo hold with Loomis curled in his lap. The ship was in transit to their next assignment, and for once they had time to rest. Through the viewport, stars streamed past in the strange distortion of FTL travel, each jump now leaving minimal damage thanks to the new drive technology. "Do you think we'll finish?" Marcus asked quietly. "Seal all the rifts, fix everything?" Loomis made a sound like distant bells, and Marcus felt their response through the bond. Maybe not everything. Maybe not in their lifetimes. But they had started something that would continue after them. More Guardian pairs were being trained. Better technology was being developed. The galaxy was learning, changing, becoming something better than it had been. That was enough. That had to be enough. Marcus thought about Aunt Elena. Wondered if she would be proud of what he'd done with her gift. She had spent 12 years protecting Loomis, keeping hope alive when the rest of the galaxy had given up. She had chosen Marcus not because he was special, but because he was desperate enough to try when no one else would. "Thank you," Marcus whispered, speaking to his aunt, though she would never hear. "For trusting me. For believing I could be more than I was. For giving me something worth fighting for." Loomis purred, a sound that resonated through multiple dimensions, and Marcus felt their shared contentment. They were tired, they were scarred, they were fundamentally changed from what they had been, but they were together. They were making a difference. They were proof that different species could bridge the impossible distance between them and create something beautiful. The Dawnbreaker continued its journey through stars that burned steadily, anchoring a reality that was slowly, carefully being healed. And in the cargo hold, a human and the last celestial weaver rested together, partners in the greatest task any species had ever undertaken, saving the galaxy. One sealed rift at a time. The story of the last Guardian's gift had only just begun.